Welcome everybody who's here already. We'll give a few minutes for other people to join us. While we're waiting for other people to jump in, I'll do a kind of quick overview, some housekeeping items, all that kind of good stuff. But just make sure you're in the right place. This is emnify's webinar focused on improving IoT outcomes with smarter IoT connectivity strategies. A lot of exciting topics that we have planned to discuss with you today. A lot of actually topics we're going to talk about, but we're going to be covering everything from how to master connectivity management, how to ensure data compliance, securing valuable information that you have or your customers have, as well as how to seamlessly integrate with IoT applications. And to discuss these topics today, we have two experts from emnify, Chad Kerr, the VP of North America Sales, and Joseph Johnson, the Technical Sales Engineer. Gentlemen, welcome and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.
I'll start. Yeah, indeed. I'm at the top of the slide. My name is Joseph Johnson, or Joe Johnson. I'm based here at the emnify office in Berlin, Germany. Originally from Ireland, as you might tell from the accent. I worked with Ericsson on mobile network rollouts right around Europe and the world. And after that, I was with the Motorola Solutions. And now I'm excited to be with emnify.
Thank you.
Chad.
And again, yeah, my name is Chad Kerr. I am the VP of Sales for North America. I spent my majority of my career in the large telcos with AT&T, and I'm excited to be here with emnify and telling you guys a little bit about some of the strategies that you need to look at as it relates to your IoT connectivity.
You'll see our QR codes as well. You can link to us if you want to connect with us or reach out to us after the webinar.
Great. So we'll get started. And this is kind of the agenda that we're going to be talking about, right? I'm not going to go through all these things, but as we look at today's environment of all these interconnected devices, right? It's key to have an IoT connectivity strategy, right? You want to be able to realize the full potential of IoT. So we're going to take you through these topics. We're going to talk about smart IoT connectivity management. How do you optimize your SIM lifecycle? Navigating through the compliance and requirements of all of these connectivities, ensuring your data is secure, and how this is being orchestrated. And that's the key to this whole topics that we're talking about today.
Chad and I we've been in this industry now for a good long time. So we've seen people try different methodologies, different technologies. We've seen the evolution, and we want to share some of our experiences so that people, choose to know what strategies there are out there and what's worked, what hasn't worked in the past.
So, and I think to add to that, JJ, and I'll call him JJ, by the way, even though his name is Joseph Johnson, but he goes by JJ. I'll talk about customer perspective. JJ will come and talk about the technical perspective that he sees. So we'll have real life examples from both the technical side from the customers, as well as just what customers' pain points that they're telling me every day when I'm talking to them during sales. So, here's where emnify really focuses our innovation on the digital transformation. And the transformation in this is holds the key to the kingdom, right? It enhances efficiency, scalability, and innovation. So, ultimately, we want to look at how everyone's moving into digital transformation and how that'll benefit your IoT strategies.
Exactly. We come from the day of analog circuits, bearers, and we've moved into the IP world, and now everything's going cloud native. So our next slide kind of breaks that down step by step. So you could see in the past, we all had a small number of SIM cards, processes were manual, there were very basic APIs, and everybody used their local network, and it was painful to go abroad. Maybe they swapped SIM card or paid horrendous roaming fees. Chad, do you think you told me there was still a lot of spreadsheets?
Yeah, so it's like in the old days, I'm not too old, right? I've been with them for a year and a half. A few years back, I would sit with customers who have thousands of connected devices out there. And because of their platforms and the way things are managed, we have to work off spreadsheets. And now, mind you, these spreadsheets encompass not only their IoT connected devices, but their traditional mobility connected devices, be it cell phones, things like this, all on one spreadsheet. So I would sit down with customers and we talk to them about their devices, how they're growing, different projects, and we're trying to manage these devices off of spreadsheet with thousands of devices. And then one of the key things I always used to take away is they have the devices. They could tell which ones were data now, so we could kind of streamline it, but then they'd have to manage by usage. Now they could look at these accounts and some of these lines would have no usage on it whatsoever, but they didn't know where these devices were. So they couldn't cancel them. So we're like, okay, in 3 months, let's look and see if that usage has changed. So that whole legacy experience of managing off spreadsheets and not knowing where their devices are is, the thing of the past. And as you move towards, some of the things JJ is going to talk about, you'll see that there's probably still customers out there doing that today, working off spreadsheets.
And this is when we say rudimentary APIs, we're talking about SOAP-based interfaces. We're talking about just basic functionality like activating a SIM card and no more. And now what we've come into the green area where we have modern APIs using REST API, using GraphQL, using a mobile network, going from being something that you buy and you administer to as a connectivity as a service. So it becomes part of your software stack, super easy to manage end to end in your business process. So I particularly like one of the customers in chats where they've done an end-to-end integration with Amazon, with their ERP system and the SIM activation. So one triggers the other, and it's a pipeline. And that's when people are innovating, that's that kind of end-to-end flow where the network is part of the provisioning process. That's that's the evolution, and that's where we would advise people to look at how do you do that as on a scalable way, and not just in the US, but also globally.
Well, I think to add to that, think about today, how do you do it, right? If you're not doing it the way JJ's kind of explaining, right? Are you getting these SIM cards and then you have to manually add in the SIM card and then connect it to the device and then get the device tested and get it out into the field, right? There's a lot of that manual processes that are still happening. And think about that if you have multiple carriers that you need to work with. Let's say you have 3 carriers and you have to do 3 different sets like that. That can be very cumbersome and time consuming, and you can't scale that way. And that's some of the things I'm hearing from customers. I can't scale because I have to do everything manually today, and that takes manpower. And the way things are moving, a lot of that manpower is a simple, quick integration, quick one button, one code that gets put in, and everything's moving in the right direction.
And it also has to be painless. So some MVNOs, they come in with a cheap local SIM card and they say, I'll resell you this SIM for this market and this SIM for this market. But managing it it's a jigsaw. One thing will work in one place, a different set of features will be available in a different place. And this, we've seen customers come back to us and say, it ended up being a nightmare. They wanted a one-stop shop, a consistent set of features administered via API, so that they can focus on actually selling the product and not trying to figure out this awful mess, the spaghetti type local SIM deployment.
And what about JJ, like on the network coverage side, right? We see from where it was, right, single home network, right, base, right? That's one network, that's all they have. And, customers are going to realize that they need more than one network. How has this evolved in, to the end where you see the cloud native mobile core network?
Exactly. When I was deploying core networks with Ericsson, everything was country based. Everything was based in servers, in racks, in data centers. And as soon as you left the local network, you were roaming, and you didn't have the same advantage, and it behaved differently. And the further away you get from home, the slower it gets. So my Irish SIM card would be horrifically slow in the US and very expensive. Might not even connect because of patchy roaming agreements. That's the first bubble there in the noughties. There was some orchestration type efforts, trying to say, okay, I'll swap this SIM with this SIM in a kind of programmatic way. It was messy. And then I just emnify is fully cloud native and global. So you don't have one local network in one specific country. It's in the cloud, deployed like AWS in every region of the world, so that you have regional connectivity and all the carriers are aggregated into one provider. So it looks and feels like you're using one global operator. So it doesn't matter if you're in Australia, Europe, or the US. It's the same type of performance. It's the same management. It's the same SIM card even. I sometimes the customers even say to me, it's the same SIM card, even if it's a US deployment or a European deployment. I was like, yep, exactly. It goes into the factory, And one type of SIM card goes in, and you can configure it then when it gets deployed. And that's the kind of strategy to allow flexibility on where you sell your product, allowing you to expand in the future into different markets without having to go back through the procurement and process of what provider can fit your needs.
Right, and that kind of leads us into, the multiple carrier thing and being able to manage all these devices and having multiple different access points and portals that you have to manage, and streamlining these processes, being able to deal with one provider to cover the globe and keep your data local, right?
And that's the thing. One network is vulnerable. So networks go down, whether it's Ecuador or Reunion or even Norway. Networks do have problems, and the cloud native network assumes that one network is going to have a problem, but there are 2 or 3 other networks there to take up the slack. And that's the beauty of this cloud native approach. You always assume something's going to go wrong, and you have a backup. So you're really improving your resiliency by adding that
Is
redundancy.
that what you're hearing from a lot of the customers, right? Redundancy is key. They can't have their network go down because then they're dead in the water, right?
Yeah, and we'll say the strategy is acknowledge it's cheap when you have one network and everything's good. But we've had so many customers come back to us and say, now I'm really happy that I had 2 networks, because that time that network went down, all our devices moved over, and that was so good to have as a backup. So should we go back actually now into the points kind of more one by
Yes,
one?
I think so. So this is what we look at, and I'll tell you from a customer's perspective, right? Today is some of the management pitfalls, right? What you want to avoid, right? Fragmentation. We talked about that. We talked about multiple carriers, multiple networks that we're having to work with, and the cumbersome piece of that, right? We also have a slow manual process that people were dealing with. That goes back to I'm putting SIM cards in one by one, or I'm managing off spreadsheets, and then multiple integrations, right? That you have to have, and think about the manpower behind it that you're using today to manage all of this. And then an inconsistent feature set, right, JJ? I mean, you've heard a lot of this. So share some of your things that you've heard from customers, and how we can improve that.
Exactly. Manual processes, for example, VPN setup. Everybody knows when you want to connect a VPN, you have this big, long, complicated spreadsheet that you get from the network department. Then you send it to the operator. They say, no, we can't do this or do that. That after a few weeks. And then your network department takes maybe another week or so. And there's this
It
back
takes
and
3
forth.
months to be. I don't mean to interrupt you, but it takes 3 months to get the VPN set up, typically with a large carrier.
Yeah, and the approach that we recommend, that we've implemented here, is make it simple. Make it as simple as possible, and make it as automated as possible. So we have an implementation where it's a button on our platform that provisions the VPN on our cloud, and the customer can connect automatically. And that's, people almost don't believe that it can be that
How
quick.
quick?
And
How
also
quick,
because
JJ? Because that's important to say. How quick does that take?
within 5 minutes, we're ready to have a VPN connection to us. Yeah, and it's cloud native, and it's scalable. I know many people during COVID, they had VPN gateways for people working from home, and all of a sudden, the number of people working at home quadrupled, and people just couldn't get online at work because the gateway was a physical thing in a rack, kind of like the legacy type architecture. Whereas being cloud native, we never have to worry. If thousands of customers say to us tomorrow, hey, I want a VPN, no problem. We scale horizontally and instantly. We don't have any bottleneck with a network team saying, excuse me, we have all these spreadsheets to analyze and to open tickets with. No, it's done. That's the future. The future is cloud native, automated, API based, scalable. So that you're not working with individual providers, individual spreadsheets, individual tickets, and inconsistencies as well. That's an absolute nightmare.
So if I'm a customer and I'm thinking I have this old antiquated way of doing this, right? And is it going to be difficult for me to move from the old way I was doing it with data centers to the new way, the cloud native way. You see problems with that, or what are the best? Do you have any best practices that how to move to that environment, or what to be looking for?
Well, again, that's our approach to make it simple, to make migration and to the move to cloud native seamless. So, for example, with our SIM card, we have one APN, and that APN allows standard internet access to your IoT cloud or to your data center, and then you can add VPN connectivity, connect to your classic data center, and you can add the AWS Transit Gateway to go AWS to AWS cloud native. And that would be the optimal architecture that we would recommend. And the nice thing about that is then you are keeping things off the internet, keeping data away from prying eyes. We'll cover security a
Mhm.
little bit later, but that think about strategies where you can secure your architecture and make it easier to manage in the future.
And all of this, helps. Like if you looked on the approved outcomes, right? Single source of connectivity management. You're not dealing with multiple carriers. You're not dealing with multiple platforms to manage devices, and you're not dealing with a spreadsheet to manage thousands of devices. And the no overhead piece that we talk about here is right. The ease of getting this implemented and getting these things online quickly, and to be able to scale, right? More and more customers, that's what they're saying. I need to be able to scale quickly, and how can I do this? Because the way they do it today, they're saying I can't scale that way because I really don't even know where do I go here. Do I gotta get another data center? All of these things. And then, like you mentioned, the consistent feature sets that we have to be able to integrate multiple integrations into one, right? So it's simple and easy to use. We try to make it easy to do business.
Like a strategy to why it's meaningful. A feature like just knowing the data usage. You want to know how much data usage across your operators across the world. So I have like 3 operators in Germany, 4 in the UK, 3 in the US. I want to know how much my device is using, and I don't care what operator it is. And a system that provides that single pane of glass so that you can focus on where the issues, what device is using too much data, or what device is not using data, so you can pinpoint where there are anomalies and where there are issues. That's the kind of approach that we would recommend to manage a global fleet of hundreds of thousands of devices.
And just before we go on to the next slide, to add to that, what about even the smaller one? Maybe they're have to manage 1,000 devices, right? Is there benefits that we see in the same way that we're talking here?
Yeah, so it's like start small, start with a user-friendly system like our web portal, and always think about how will I do it in future. And you can grow your processes with the scale of your fleet. So for example, we start off with a website type administration with bulk actions, multiple select, and then we would go up to a no-code type automation system with something like Zapier or Make or Automate, so that you can do things in bulk, maybe the hundreds or the thousands of devices. And then when you get to the tens to the hundreds of thousands of devices, then you really want to have the ability to move seamlessly to a REST API. And that's also one of the things. Think about, do I get the full feature set in the REST API than I do in the portal? Some people often overlook that. The REST API is often an afterthought for carriers, but the way our system is built, everything's done via the REST API. And the portal is like a nice, easy way to get started so you can scale up easily. So keep an eye out for that. And are there any hidden costs with using the API? Because for us, as we say, we're using it by default. So it's not an extra, it's part and parcel. But keep an eye out when you want to scale and use that API functionality. Will it cost you more?
That's perfect.
So I kind of went on a
That's
rant there.
great. No, this is the type of things that we want to explain to everybody and talk about. Thinking about different ways to do it today, right? What is your old way? What is the new way? What's going to be beneficial for you to be able to grow your IoT connectivity? And what's your strategy, right? Do you have a strategy? I always talk to customers. The first thing I ask them, what's your IoT strategy? And sometimes they scratch their head and like, can you help me with that? And this is where we go with it.
Yeah. I had an old colleague, and he said that He went for an emnify SIM because administration. He works for a company and he wants everybody to be able to manage their connectivity for their devices. It shouldn't be his personal SIM with his personal login that he has to share with people. That's not a good approach.
And that's good that you said it. So we're probably going to touch on that a little later, but that's what I see from some people. They buy it through the traditional data sets from the carriers, which then they get to manage it off a traditional, like you and I would manage our own cell phone bill off of that type of platform. That doesn't work in this environment. So I'm glad that you said that.
Exactly.
So yeah, now we talk about, optimizing the SIM lifecycle management and some of the pitfalls that we have that I've seen, right, from a sales perspective. And then I'll let JJ talk a little bit more from the technical side and some of the things that he sees with customers, right? So some of the pitfalls are fixed term contracts. What does that mean? It means I buy a SIM card from a carrier on a 2-year, and this is my pricing, this is my data, and that's what I'm stuck with. So can I grow? I can grow by buying more, but I'm stuck in this term for 2 years with this data set, and that's all I can do. And then SIMs assigned to certain countries, right? You can't have one SIM for multiple countries. When I say multiple, more than one with some of these other large carriers, difference between what things that you can do with us. And then no updates possible, right? Coverages are changing, networks are changing, all this stuff is changing, but you can't update the SIM cards.
Hey, Chad, let me let me jump in here. As you kind of mentioned, no updates possible. This is a question that has come up in past conversations. We've talked about it on our podcast before, but I think it's a good thing to kind of expand on is why would I need to update my SIM?
Yeah, a lot of people are familiar with like consumer eSIM technology, and they think, isn't all this eSIM about, having when I'm on holiday, that I have a different SIM? But actually, as IoT evolves, new standards are coming online, like NB-IoT over satellite. And sometimes you want a SIM that is not just able to connect to multiple carriers on the ground, but you also want to connect to that carrier provided by satellite technology. And even those technology types, it's we have a SIM based on UICC technology where we can update it and open up that access. So now, even in the areas where you don't have coverage, we'll say parts of the US or Australia, or even parts of Germany like Brandenburg, sometimes you need to use satellite technology. And if you ask most providers, can you update your SIM to give me satellite access? The answer is probably going to be no. And it does cost that bit more to have EU ICC technology on the physical SIM card, but it's, we say, worth it in the long run to kind of give you that assurance and that peace of mind that when everybody else is using satellite technology, you'll be able to too. I think, Chad, I think you said in the past, was it agri-tech wasn't even a term? I was just thinking about the agri-tech is now a key IoT use case. And in the past, people said, hey, we don't cover the
Yes,
fields, the rural
that was funny, right? So
areas.
like you said, whether it's agriculture or you talk about cattle, and we used to tell the story, well, who's covering the cows, or who cares about the agriculture or any of that stuff. Well, guess what? That's important now, right? We have a lot of customers today that are in the middle, they have these cattle fields, right? And the cattle is a huge asset, and they need coverage, and the traditional cellular can't cover it. So what do? Well, they have to get satellite. So with the eSIM technology, right, they're able to have both, right, where they have areas of the fields or their cattle farms that they have cellular connectivity, but way out here in the middle of nowhere they don't. So they need to be able to have access to satellite, and that's the benefit of that.
Exactly. And NB-IoT is designed as technology to enable that kind of smart cow tracking or telemetry information to be sent via the terrestrial network or via the satellite network to the cloud, directly to the cloud. And being able to update the SIM card is really, really, really important to facilitate those kind of use cases that nobody even thought about 4 or 5 years ago.
Explain that a little bit more, right? So they don't have to go in and take that SIM card out and put another one, or just add another one in, right? In this scenario, they can just do an update over the air, right?
Even it depends on your carrier and how they manage it. But the goal is that an off-the-shelf NB-IoT device with like an emnify SIM card that's updatable will soon be able to use satellite technology to send data back to the cloud. And the standard is designed to have pretty much no change to the NB-IoT device, depending on the firmware. We're right at the cusp of it being introduced, so this is a really exciting time. And I would advise anybody, keep an eye out, because this is getting up and running right now.
That's great. So why don't you talk about, so another things that we see, right, as it relates to managing of the SIMs and all of this in their devices, some of the improved outcomes, right? We talk about, like you see over there, activate and suspend, suspend on demand, the global single, and all of those things. Can you share some things that you've heard from customers or what the benefits of those are?
I like that use case earlier on, where the SIMs go into the devices. If you're stuck with a fixed term contract, you're paying from day one, or you have a lock-in once you activate it. Whereas it's clever to be elastic. Just like the cloud, if you can expand your fleet of activated SIMs and suspend them on demand, that allows you to react to the different business needs. Or we have that pipeline of the device gets ordered, the device gets activated by the customer on your system, triggering activation on our system. And then we can see even the days of the week, if it's a work day, if it's a weekend, because people are activating on demand and suspending on demand as well. And this is generally a good idea, and that flexibility is really, really important. And you never know when unexpected events are going to come up, like dare I say, COVID again, or an economic upturn or downturn. And that flexibility is highly recommended.
Well, yeah, and what I've seen in the past too, when we have seasonal customers that maybe don't need these SIMs activated all the time, and they have to go deactivate them right themselves on a certain time frame, or call the carrier to do this, and then they can only have it deactivated or suspended, we will call it, for a certain amount of time frame, and then it activates again, and then they have to go back and forth and back and forth. With this technology, they can set a date, they can set parameters, right, for when it needs to be suspended from this time to this time, and then once you got the date in there, they'll turn back on. Is that accurate?
Yeah, if you have a seasonal use case, you can time activations and suspensions. And with a system that gives you full visibility of your usage and your activity, you can consume the data. In our system, we call it a data streamer. All the metadata about usage and activity is provided in real time, so that you can analyze and take action to suspend as soon as you no longer need a SIM card or connectivity online. And then you can schedule to reactivate it. And that's something you can do manually in a portal with no code. I think Zapier is I like using Zapier in demonstrations, because you've got this Google Calendar functionality where you can say, on a particular date of the year, switch on all these SIM cards, and another date of the year, switch them all off again. So for example, if I was doing like a Christmas market, I would switch them on before the first Sunday of Advent, and then come New Year, I would switch them all off again. Easy
Easy.
peasy. You should visit the Christmas markets in
That's
Germany one
that's
day.
right. I did, and it was great. So right, UICC technology is the way to go, right? That's the way things are moving. That's how you're going to be able to, again, scale your business, right? Create efficiencies, all of these things that we're trying to do to have this specific IoT strategy going forward for yourself.
Yeah. And the thing is, an eUICC SIM will cost more upfront, but the cost of swapping a SIM out is horrific. So, it's that little bit more upfront as an insurance against a far higher risk later.
Perfect.
I don't know, how much does a site visit cost? If you send somebody out over here, it's like easily 100, 200
Well, I have an
euros.
example of, and it's on the next slide. I'll tell you a little bit about it, about having to go and visit these devices that are in the field and swapping a SIM card out or doing some things about it. So I think we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide then.
All right. So JJ, You know all about GDPR and compliance. So this is your baby. Take this one
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, as soon as you come to Germany, everybody's going to ask, do I have your permission to have your data? Is nobody will take a photo of you without asking you for your permission. And everybody wants to know, where's my data going? I want to know that my data is safe and secure in the European Union. Like Facebook as well is in hot water in Ireland. It's like, okay, you cannot send data willy-nilly here and there. And this is one of the questions. Where is your provider based? Where is the data going? Where is the data flow? If my SIM is in Europe, where does the data flow? If my SIM is in Australia, where does the data flow? And what we're doing in emnify is we're keeping the data local, so that data in North America, in the US, stays in the US. In the EU, it's within Europe. In Asia, it's within in Asia, and we have ways of actually steering it. So you can have device policies that say, okay, I explicitly want to use internet breakout in the US or the European Union. I want the connection to my data center to be terminated there. It's something that wasn't so critical in the past, but more and more people are asking these questions. Even in previous companies, cybersecurity questionnaires are now asking, tell me, where is the data at rest? Where is the data moving? Through what countries does it go? I want to have transparency about what platform you're using. And this is part of your strategy should also be to check that.
So why is that important, right? So what could happen if you if you're not compliant with some of these things?
Well, we've seen operators out there who have tried reselling consumer type SIMs for IoT use cases in roaming across in other countries where they're not allowed to do it. And they've come to us because somebody pulled the plug. That's why we have the pull the
Right.
plug icon there. Literally sudden switch off.
So you mean in the
Um,
example that I
I
have,
think,
right? The example that I had of that one customer who, they were on one carrier and they were spending a lot of time in Canada. And the rules say you could not spend so much time in Canada. And if their devices did not touch the home network within a certain time frame, you could be shut off. And this customer had thousands of devices terminated because they spent more than 3 months in Canada and not touching back to their home network. So they weren't aware that no one provided them that information. Next thing you know, they have a whole fleet that's down, and it's because that they did not touch their home network within a 3-month time frame.
exactly. And that's where we go. It's important to think, are you buying IoT connectivity? Are you buying consumer connectivity? Or are you buying consumer connectivity being, like a wolf in sheep's clothing? Is it consumer being sold as IoT? And I would strongly recommend that people do due diligence on their suppliers, because that risk of being cut off and having to physically swap the SIM is so high, and it's happening more and more.
And I think if you look at that's a good point, because that's what I see a lot of out there, is that they're buying what they'll call it a telemetry plan, but it's on a traditional consumer plan, meaning it's managed that way. So when it's managed that way, when I say by that is you're not managed off a platform or a portal that's separate from traditional wireless services. And that's what I see a lot of people, because there is telemetry plans that are consumer oriented that are out there, but they don't fall and meet some of these compliance in some of these regulations.
Exactly. And then once one country starts focusing on compliance, other countries start following. In the past, IoT wasn't so, it was all rolled up in one, and now we see more and more focus on it, let's say, industry specific suppliers, growing IoT use cases, and the compliance that goes with it. The market is maturing.
All right. Anything else?
Then, if it's okay,
You ready to
yeah,
start?
I'll pop on to the next slide here as well. Exactly. As I was saying, the cloud, what I love about the cloud is we have the cloud can never go down. Pretty much, it's the I've come from an era of networks and data centers and applications being hosted in data centers, and everybody likes their trusted data center that they've planned the resilience options, they've planned the redundancy options. But the thing is, somebody always has a bigger botnet out there. Somebody always has more resources. It's extremely hard to provide the best resilience on your own. You would need a huge team, and that's where the cloud really offers that resilience that's hard to match. And that's why we've invested and based our entire core network on the cloud. And we are so confident in our SLAs because it's a tried, proven, resilient system. And we see operators going up and down all the time, whereas our core network is rolling on.
So like, this is why you're telling me this is why moving to the cloud is better than, people are their trusted data centers that they're using today.
Exactly, exactly. And so when you move your connectivity to the cloud, now it becomes a super resilient resource, and the device ends up being the weakest point, or the data center. So when you plan, if you have a strategy to move to either keep your data center or move your data center to the cloud, or have both, you can actually have VPN connections to both cloud and data center on our system. That gives you backup options. That gives you even more flexibility. And then you have to think about the security of the device itself. We see in the UK, for example, a new security law has been passed through the UK Parliament, where it's not something that everybody intends to do. All engineers intend to have great security, and all management says, but what does it cost? Whereas in the UK, it is now becoming a compliance requirement, and companies will be held responsible and liable for their IoT devices so that the communications are encrypted and secure, so that the device is kept up to date, because a lot of IoT devices have unfortunately become those bots that attack those traditional data centers. Mentioned
Like,
one
I
in the
was
States.
just a couple weeks ago, I was with a customer and we were talking about some of the security issues and some, firmware updates that are needed because of potential hacks. And this customer has 72,000 devices out in the field. And last year alone, he spent $900,000 in truck rolls to get out there to do updates to ensure that they're secure. And hence the reason why they're looking at us moving to the way we do things in the cloud environment. So this was something that had like immediate impact to their bottom line by reducing the amount of truck rolls out there, because they had to go check on firmware updates because the potential for hackers that are out there.
So my advice is, as a good strategy, plan with a connectivity provider who will give you remote access to your device in a secure way. So for example, we can give you access via VPN to a fixed IP for every SIM card. Because it's IoT, we gave every SIM card a private IP by default, not a public IP. Oh, a public IP is the old way of doing things. It was easy, but it made every device out there a big target for those botnets, for malicious actors. So keep your devices off the public network, no public IPs, and secure access via public IP is my top recommendation in a scalable way. Because don't just think about the devices in the US, but think about them all around the world. Think about the devices in Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Germany, China, India, Australia. And I would recommend practicing those firmware updates. We also have mechanisms in place so that you can limit the data usage in the normal case, and then up it for that month when you want to do a firmware update. So it's like giving the data as much data as it needs, but no more, and the flexibility to move up and down when you do need to do an update.
Great.
Yeah. I think we better roll on to the next slide. Time is
Yes.
flying by.
So finally, this slide, JJ, to me is kind of boring. So I think I want to let you take this over because you understand this, and this is the key, right? Orchestration, putting this all together. It's the most important thing about this. You're having a good IoT strategy and being smart about it.
Yeah. So we say some of our smartest clients have automated everything. It a relatively small number of employees running a huge fleet of devices, making a good amount of money too, because it's all orchestrated and managed via API. They started with no code, and then as went into the serious numbers, the REST API does everything that they need to do on our platform, and they put the control in their customers' hands. Their customer presses a button and it does the equivalent actions on our platform. So it's ironing out your workflows. When things are automated, then you can bring in intelligence. Then you can use the metadata from our system or somebody else's system to feed an AI model to learn what is normal behavior. When do I need to activate? When do I need to suspend? How much data do I need? Is there an anomaly? Which devices are offline? Which devices are suspicious? They're doing what they shouldn't be doing. And that helps you to focus on the areas of concern and really have a good outcome. Yeah. So, Chad, I think we better see if there are
Good.
any
You want to
questions
in
of
the chat
interest here
there?
as well. Yeah. So somebody's asking about the SIM management. And we say emnify manages emnify SIMs to make it super easy. You still get a SIM card. So the M2M eSIM technology, that's EUICC in the physical SIM card still, not to be confused with consumer eSIM QR code type implementation. And emnify again wants to keep it simple. So any update, if and when we switch on satellite on the SIM card, you don't need to do anything. It's just talk to Chad and agree on a good plan for satellite connectivity so that you can manage it and have control of it.
Yeah, that was a great chat, guys. Let's go ahead and we can dive into a few other questions on here, and I'll bring them up on the screen so the audience can see them at the same time. So from Nick Lambert, would implementing emnify eliminate a need for a MDM solution such as Mobile Iron or MAS 365?
So the MDM is to manage the device firmware itself. So what we're talking about here is like the scalable connectivity management and connectivity itself. The device management, we're device neutral. So you can choose any device managed by Mobile Iron, but it's the firmware itself is up to you.
Okay, perfect.
We're agnostic there. I think I would recommend for people to, avoid providers who are trying to do everything. When somebody tries to be good at everything, they lose focus. You're pretty good at one thing. So like, yeah, I know device manufacturers out there who have really good device firmware management.
Hey,
Mhm.
and I think to
Another question.
that, maybe there's something you can add. And it's not really a question because more and more I'm talking to customers. They hear the word NB-IoT, they hear LTE, but that's not always readily available across the globe. So in a scalability environment, right, it's important to make sure that your device that you're looking at has all the network types and technologies available to it, or is there ways that you shouldn't even think about that or reasons?
Exactly. If you ask me if you want a device technology that will work around the world, you're talking, it used to be 2G, now it's LTE Cat 1. LTM and NB-IoT, very strong in North America, very weak in South America and Central America, and Europe, Africa, again, same story. It's potluck if you get one or the other, but 2G used to be everywhere, and 4G Cat 1 it'll pretty much be able to use it everywhere. Just check the radio band supported.
I had a comment here that says there's a UK phrase for this. It's a jack of all trades and a master of none. To your comment earlier.
Exactly.
Another comment / question came in. SLAs on the cloud are very resilient, and they agree with that. You spoke about privacy and data protection. How do you see this point, WRT cloud operations?
Cloud operations, again, you want people who are diligent and work for a company with that kind of like German diligence, where respect for data and treating data as a highly valuable asset, that's absolute top priority. So that when you deal with the European level of data protection, that's a pretty much, well, pardon me, Chad, but I say that's the gold standard. The US is pretty good too, but when you design the cloud-based system with security and the regionality in mind from the beginning, it's security by design from the beginning, not just IT security, but also data security.
Perfect. I think you answered part of this question, but I'm going to put it up on the screen so we have it here. From Deepak, it's so does emnify manage the SMDP plus or own the SMD plus, and MNO just provides all the profiles to emnify?
Mhm. Yeah, so we remove all the complexity of, say, eSIM orchestration and trying to juggle profiles. We've seen people try to do that, and it became a very messy strategy. So we give you a SIM that just works, and That's the plain easy way to do it, really.
That's awesome. I know we have a few minutes here, so if anybody else has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I had a couple things that came up just as I was listening to you all walk through it, and I'm curious, when you mentioned you took some time to talk about regulations and compliance standards, are there any particular ones or that people should really be focused on or aware of, or how do people kind of stay in the know when it comes to those standards changing, being updated, things along those lines, or is that something they just kind of rely on working with a company like Emnify to kind of keep them in the know of?
Chad, I'll
Oh,
let you answer
that
that
is a
one.
good question, right? Because that's something that so we have a whole network team and behind the scenes that provide updates to us, right? They're providing to the sales. So we're informing our customers as we talk to them, and we're providing, from through our website and all of the other things, updates. But it's having those conversations with the customers and asking these questions, and then we provide in the feedback form, right? So everybody understands, because things change rapidly, and if you're not compliant, there could be some hefty fines, right? JJ, I mean, we've talked about that before,
Right.
but I don't know if there's anything you want to add to it, because it's something that's ongoing now.
Yeah. And then the rules for consumers are different to the rules for IoT.
Right.
We often think of connectivity as generic, but actually we have specific agreements in place. So there are places where we can say this IoT device and this IoT SIM can roam across Europe, and it doesn't matter if it's 6 months here or 6 months even outside the Europe, in the US, Canada, etc. Whereas if it's a consumer SIM, different rules apply.
Oh, go ahead,
And
JJ.
so,
Go ahead, finish up.
yeah. So for some people where, IoT is just like a side hustle, they don't have that focus on getting those agreements in place.
So and then when we're from a sales perspective, when we're talking to customers, right, it's important that we ask them all of those details. Where a device stationary? Are they moving? How long will they be in a certain area? Because we know, what agreements we have and what regulations and compliances are in place,
Right.
that we have to make sure, because we want to make sure we tell them, okay, if you're going to be in, let's just say, it's an example, Canada, maybe you have to touch the home network again within a month or whatever, those type of things. So we have that, and that's why it's important to educate the customers and find out all the information possible when we're talking to them.
For sure. Yeah. I guess this brings me to another question that I think is worth mentioning. And obviously, a lot of people listening to this and that kind of follow along in the IoT space looking to adopt, there's all these different components of an IoT solution they need to be thinking about. And they work with companies on whether it's the connectivity piece, the hardware piece, the software side, application layer, and so forth. When it comes to the connectivity management piece of this, how early in the process should this be being thought about and planned when they're thinking about and getting ready to start either building or adopting an IoT solution? Because like you said, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, right? What are the devices doing? Are they stationary? Are they moving? Where are they going to be? What kind of environment are they going to be in? What regions are they going to be in? So when is a good time for them to be thinking about this connectivity management kind of plan and putting that together and kind of coming up with the things that are necessary so that when they speak to a company like Emnify, they have all the things that need to be thought about, or at least a lot of pieces of information that will help you all get them to market much faster?
So I think at the very beginning, right, because a lot of times they're just initially saying, I have this product, I have this idea. It probably starts with an idea, if they're not already doing it today, or if they're doing it today, they have to upgrade technologies. So it's like, okay, I start with this product, and they say, okay, I'm going to get this. What's it going to cost me? What's my ROI? All of these things building up, and then they're like, okay, now I got to go get it connected. Well, maybe when they look back and they say, do I have all the bands required? Do I have all this necessary networks availability into that device module and that chipset? So it's from my perspective, it's at the very beginning they should be thinking about that. Yeah, I don't know what you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you want to avoid those nasty surprises in what it costs. Because again, if you start with a consumer model that works on one carrier where you are right now, and then you realize later, oh, there's a part of the country where it just doesn't work, or there's another country where it got cut off after 3 months, now you have to go back to square one.
Right.
And you have to justify to your manager, well, why didn't it work? And you're like, well, it worked here. I was like, yeah, it worked. It worked in your office. We had, for example, a tea in South Africa, and it was, it worked in Cape Town. But as soon as you leave the urban areas, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or for a long time in the UK, was on the East Coast, but not the West Coast. And those kind of insights into IoT deployments, that comes from experience.
Right.
So, you want to talk early to people who have that specialized experience. Even if you don't go with them, they can still give you some good insights, some good tips on technologies, radio types. Yeah, and that over and over again, we see people who have to go back to the drawing board when something
Right.
goes wrong.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting point because that's often a point in conversation around the individual use case, potentially the environment, the region that the deployment is going to take place, influencing potential challenges that are going to come up, right? So, are there, from your perspective on the connectivity side, are there certain regions or maybe just particular use cases that require more planning, more thought, more kind of expertise kind of going into that in order to be successful with the deployment because of one reason or another?
So, for example, when it comes to technology, 2G is always the cheapest option. So you'll have people in Europe and Africa planning to deploy 2G globally, whereas in the US, it's gone. It's already
Right.
gone. And you always have to think of your device lifecycle as like a maybe 3 to 10 year lifecycle. So what technology will be available there and what's the cost of replacing it? And will my device, will it be a regional radio module? Will it be for North America? Will it be for Europe? Or will it be a global module? And what will the complexity be if I want to go beyond the region that I first have support for, that
Right.
hardware support in the radio module? For our SIM, it's easy. We can reconfigure it any way we want, which
Right.
is nice and good, and it's updatable. Or like the South American market as well, like the Brazilian regulation requirements are very tight, and you want a partner who's able to navigate that, the trickiest ones. And a lot of these resellers are, they don't know. They have to go back to their local carrier that they're buying from or some local platform that they're trying to talk about. Chad, maybe you know more being across the
Yeah.
water.
Well, it's like Gerald has a comment in there, like, carriers shutting down 2G. The 2G, 3G shut down. There's going to be some exceptions that are still out there because of utilities companies and things like that. But you don't bet. People tend to, what I've seen is bet on old technology because of the cost structure, right? And the way technology has changed. I mean, in the last, I don't know, year and a half, you can't bet on that old technology. I mean, it's going to cost a little bit more, for modules and things like that for different technologies, but the long-term effect on it is going to be better off for you. I like what Gerald said in there, right? Betting on 2G is like another pitfall. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys talked a lot about having to go, betting on these older technologies, and this is just like when we're talking with Sims of the past versus now, and having to manually go and switch them out versus being able to upgrade them. Right? Is you're kind of looking to save money on things you're going to probably pay for it in the long run, or pay for it in a different way. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. We talked about sunsetting before and different networks and stuff, and keeping an eye on that and really planning for future proofing your devices through the connectivity that you're providing yourselves in those solutions is vastly important when it comes to this kind of thing. We have like 2 minutes here, and I do want to give you time to kind of tell our audience where to learn more and things like that. But prior to doing that, the last thing I wanted to ask you is obviously a big topic in the world right now is AI. How is AI kind of playing a role in connectivity management, or how are you kind of seeing it really potentially feed into providing additional functionality and capabilities on the connectivity side?
We see it actually driving, we say, more data from the field because people want to monitor more and more to feed those AI models. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like environmental monitoring, agri-tech, so that you have early data and accurate insights using an AI model as soon as possible.
Sure.
And also our network is a source of data as well. So you can see an uptick in activity, you can see the seasonal behavior, you can get insights. So it's complementary to IoT. And I think even you can see that in Austin, they have the upcoming artificial intelligence and IoT because they go hand in hand. You're using that data. And as these, we say, like a good environmental IoT application, that could go global.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to people, okay, when you're thinking about that, your strategy, if you're going to do something like national in the US, you could do something like NB-IoT. If you want, because there's good NB-IoT coverage in the US. If you want to
Yep.
go global, maybe think about, look at the technologies available around the world. Maybe you have to pay more, go for maybe Cat 1 LTE, but will it pay off because it will work?
Yep. Yep.
And what's the complexity of having that single SKU? And then you can feed your AI model all around the world.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you both. Fantastic conversation. Lots of good insights here. Last thing I wanted to ask you to do for our audience is where they can learn more and follow up with any questions, thoughts, additional things they want to talk about.
Well, you can obviously you've seen our QR codes there. You can scan us and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can go to emnify.com and learn a little bit more. We have some shows coming up in Austin and in Las Vegas in September that we'll be at. But again, I think Ryan, you're dropping in the buyer's guide and some information into the chat for everybody to share, to take home and read.
Yep.
And I said, reach out to us whenever you can. It was a pleasure for us to join you today and share a little bit of knowledge that we have, a little bit of background on what strategies should look like as you try to get more scalable and smarter into the IoT connectivity marketplace.
Yep, sounds good. And yeah, everybody check out emnify. So both of you, thank you so much for your time, and I hope our audience got a lot of value out of it. And thank everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All the best.